including Paytm and a whole bunch of other ones, which I'm not sure if Survi can share or not. Then she joined AWS, a complete shift from being a pure strategy geek to a hardcore tech nerd, tech product management nerd, if I can call it. So she joined AWS. She's managing Redshift, and I think you have launched a couple of new products as well, new services as well at AWS. All through and through, she has been very, very supportive to product management, to product in general. Survi, why don't you share a couple of things about what you're working on right now?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I actually started my journey of product in a very small 4 people startup. I was doing design. I was coding a little bit. I was also doing product. I was doing sales. This is what everyone does, and this is what probably Talvinder does today, right? This is a day in the life of every sort of small startup. From there, I joined a sort of 100 people startup, which then from where I got hired into Alibaba as the strategy lead, and ever since then I've been sort of glued into this world of product. I transitioned from doing B2C products to B2B products almost, and not only B2B but products for developers, products for enterprises in my role at AWS. AWS has been a really exciting journey for me. I used to work on Redshift, and I still am involved a lot with Redshift and overall the entire analytics and database stack at AWS. And last year, I launched a new product. It's called Synthetics. It sits in the CloudWatch family of monitoring products. So that's a brand new AWS service that that now is a full stack business. And currently I'm working on launching another one this year. This is going to be again in the analytics space, and it's going to be a new AWS service. A really great experience in working on growing an existing business, but also launching a new business. I'm happy to take more. I'm happy to sort of take more Q&A at a slightly later point when we start chatting. And
thank you so much, Survi. So, I mean, today's chat, as you're aware of, so a thing that people don't usually focus too much right now, because they're already, they're trying to figure out how to get into product management. So, right, without thinking too much about what is a product team, what is product team composed of, what is the product manager's role in that team, how OKRs are set, what are the different flavors of product teams that exist in different companies, and so that will help them in understanding how to position themselves. So if somebody is very techie, then perhaps getting into a technical product team will be a much better thing for them. It will be an easier segue than entering a, let's say, a strategy product team, for instance, right? So you have groomed a whole bunch of people. You have been hiring left, right, and center PMs, right? It'll be great to hear from you how you look at product teams, what is the advice you will give them, and how to set up OKRs and everything else. Over to you. Thank you.
Let me start by first sort of taking a view of the type of teams and the type of companies that these teams reside in. So let's say you're a really small startup, and that's sort of the interest, right? You as a PM want to learn a whole bunch of functions, right? And you want to learn how to sort of grow something 0 to 1. In that case, you're probably going to start by looking for teams that are really, really small, and these may be smaller teams, newer initiatives in large companies. These may be startups in smaller companies. Now, in these teams, most times the first or the second PM is just going to be that foundational product manager. And a lot of times over the years, over maybe a period of 1 or 2 years, this person goes and manages other hires or other PMs that are going to come.
Sorry, I'm just bugging you. There's some issue with the volume. Is it possible to speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I'm
Or,
gonna and let me actually just grab a headset. Give me a sec.
yeah, sure.
Well, I'm just going to speak up at this point. Okay, sounds great. Well, for anyone who can't hear me, just drop me a message on the chat. Um, but what I was getting at was for smaller teams and for newer type of product initiatives within companies, you will find yourself being the first or the second or the foundational PM, and there really part of your job is always around growing the product discipline, growing the product team, how to scale your team, and there a large part of your responsibility at some point will shift to hiring new people, understanding how to get them to be from zero to productive in a very short amount of time. It's also going to be how to recognize the strengths in people that you need. So let's say you are a really strong growth person, right? So you know how to get your customer base from 10 to like 1 million, right? um, at the same time, you want to understand how do you want to complement that with technical product management, right? So you want to build some IP on the technical side. So then the people you're looking for are really people who will complement you on that, and people who are really strong to work with engineering and create that IP. At the same time, let's say you are a design PM, right, and you want to complement that with maybe someone who is really really good at pricing or really good at growth. And so you want to understand from a pricing strategy perspective, are you really like getting that, are you really like optimizing your price, are you really optimizing your cost? So that's one golden rule of building a new team. The second is, how do you, now that let's say you make your first or second product hire, those first or second product hires are very very critical for your team. You also want to understand as a team what you want, um, what kind of a personality, almost, right? These are like soft skills, but what kind of personality do you want? Does your team thrive if everyone is one big happy family, or does your team thrive if everyone is very very efficient at their work, and then 5 p.m. they go back to their homes and they sort of, they like to cut off, they like to sort of take their own time and then come back 9 a.m. tomorrow and then be super fresh and again be very very productive during that day? And or do they like ad hoc meetings? They're like, do they actually prefer sort of ad hoc engagements where they're pinging you a little bit after 6 and it's not yet awkward? That's the style, that's the culture of the team. So very very important for you to understand that this new person who's going to be joining isn't unhappy with this kind of a relationship. um, some other things when you're hiring PMs, or when I'm personally looking for more people on my team, are, is this person going to match up to the pace that my team is going to be? So from your perspective, when you're looking for jobs, make sure you understand the pace that you're getting into. Personally for me, like, the first experience that I had with a 4 people startup, that was just being thrown into the deep end. There is no day, there's no night. You sort of, I mean, you're sort of working for a mission, a vision, and you just get it done. At the same time, there are times in your life when you do want a balance, you do want some time to yourself, you want some time for the work. It doesn't mean you're doing less. And so really important for you to understand that the person who's going to join your team, that the first few hires are going to understand your pace. They are going to also follow, I mean, you will be able to follow and keep up with the work that you're doing. um, I would also look for, one of the last things I would look for is actually the level of expertise that this person is going to bring. So again, it's sort of a handshake, right? When you're looking for a role, make sure you have that handshake. But when you're hiring, you definitely want that handshake. You want this person to be either able to learn how to be technically deep, or you want this person to be able to match up to how technically deep you are and maybe do a little bit more, right? So you want to hire people who are better than you. You want to hire people who are better than your next best employee. Whenever I've hired, there's been a golden rule, which is this person better than majority of my teams, my existing team, my existing talent, and so always look at that as a benchmark. um, Now I think when this is sort of growing a team, when you sort of start scaling a team, that's when you've really got to consider a scalable mechanism to hire. Oftentimes when you're growing a team, I personally hire, I handpick people, I sort of take my time with getting two, three, four people. When this happens at scale, you've really got to figure out the mechanisms to hire, right? And the mechanisms, meaning how do you scale out the interview process, right? How do you involve a lot more people to interview for you? And by this, what I mean is, how do you trust the judgment of a lot more people? From a hiring manager's perspective, it's just taking on a little bit more risk in hiring, right? One bad hire is it can be a pretty risky proposition for a perfectly functioning, growing team, right? And at the same time, when you're scaling out this process, you also want to understand at what growth are you expecting, right? um, I'm going to pause here. Any questions on sort of how to understand from a hiring manager's perspective uh, what um, what it takes to sort of start a 0 to 1 team? And then I'm going to go on to sort of my experience with more scale teams. Um, and I believe there is one question, which is experience from transitioning from a startup to an MNC, right? And the environment and the process.
So,
So,
sorry, I'm just pausing you. So there is definitely a question, that Satish has asked. You touched upon how a hiring manager, how as a person who is not a product manager or who's trying to be a product manager, interviewing with a bunch of companies, how does he know what kind of what kind of teams am I entering into, and how do I position myself so that I can position myself as somebody who can get aligned in your prospective company as an outsider. Number one. Sorry, I'm just also taking a second. Bharat, how to move from not product professional product professional, not the scope of today's talk. We will be talking about all of this in the next class. Okay, next class is all about career moves and stuff. Today, let's just focus on understanding how product teams function, how product teams exist, what do you do inside, and how do you know what kind of teams you're entering into. Just focus on that scope of learning. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you think a PM outside or aspirant outside can figure out what teams he's entering into and etc. What are the avenues?
absolutely. And that is a great question. That is something that I personally do a lot of research on before
Louder,
I.
a little louder, please.
So that is a great question, and that is something that I do a lot of research before I join a team. One of There are some hacks around it, right? The simple answer to your question is that you will never really know 100% before you enter the team what probably the product they're working on. It might be a confidential product, right? So you'll probably know the area, the broad area. You'll probably not know the next few milestones that are coming up. But what you will know is some of the milestones that this team has helped launch publicly in the past, right? So those are that's sort of on the works on what are you going to work on from that standpoint. The other thing you want to know is actually where does this team sit in the hierarchy in the org structure for that organization. And so, for example, for my team, I want to understand how far I am from the CEO, right? And then what that means is typically like for PMs, you can easily interact with skip level managers, you can interact with their managers. So that's kind of the flexibility you want, and you want to understand how much exposure you're going to get as part of this role. And while doing this kind of a Q&A session, like these sessions, these Q&As are great when you're doing an informational call. These Q&As are great when you're asking, so do you have questions for me in the last 10 minutes of your interview? Don't ask them, so what do you don't like I think it's a waste of a question when you ask them, so what is the day in the life of a product manager, right? Ask them, so what is your org structure look like? What are your team's deliverables? What have you launched in the last few months, in the last 6 months? And these are really telling signs for you to understand, for a person, what the org structure looks like, how much influence you're going to have, and also how do they set their goals? Are they meeting their goals or not? Um, at the same time, I think it really depends on where you are coming in. So if you're coming in at a very senior position, right, you want to understand if you are going to have a team, right? Are you going to get a team right away? If you're coming in at a senior position, you want to understand if there's enough portfolio for you that you will get, right? Enough portfolio meaning you have some dedicated, at least some ideas on dedicated initiatives, right? And these dedicated initiatives will be something you will start with, right? So your first 3 months of the company, this is what you're measured on. And so you want to have a slightly clear understanding of doing that. Now, if you're coming in as a new person, right, as a new PM, maybe as an associate PM or even a PM, not a senior PM, then you want to understand how many other PMs are there on the team, and if you don't have any other PMs, should you not join it? No, probably not. You actually want to understand if you have enough to learn from the manager who's hiring you, right? So you can have peers, but you can also have a manager who you have a lot to learn with. Again, there you want to understand the kind of opportunities that you're going to get. Um,
Got it.
so those are sort of those are the range of questions and investigations you want to do about the team and the org structure before you join, and of course the products that they're working on.
Got it. Okay, two things. One, Survi, can you try to figure out your volume thingy? Maybe the mic is hidden somewhere. Some
Yes, I will.
mic
I,
testing, mic testing. Hello, hello. One, two, three, one, two,
I
three.
will also speak louder. I apologize, folks.
Yeah, it was better sometime back,
Okay.
but yeah, it went down. No worries. So there are a few other questions. So effectively, what you're saying is when while if you're part of the interview, if you're at all getting interviewed, then try to ask this question about org structure, about what exactly has been shipped in the past, and through that you can investigate and find out what is working, what is not working, and whether it is the kind of team that I would like to be part of. Right? Got it. Now, the problem here, which I think a whole bunch of people are asking here, and that is, um, what does it take to, for example, there are two, three questions, which all of them have the similar theme, which is, what does it take to pass that first level of filter of screening? Essentially, how do you get to the interview itself? Right? I'm seeking nowadays technical product manager. I'm not from a technical background. Similarly, another one, what do you prefer in the employee when you hire, etc., etc. So, which is basically all of them are the same theme of how do I get past that first screening. Now, that is a careers problem, honestly, a careers question, which we'll be addressing in the next session. But perhaps you can just quickly touch upon that in the next 2 minutes because people are not going to rest otherwise.
So let me give you a hiring manager's perspective, right? Just like you are curious to understand the day in the life of a product manager. I think it's very important to understand the day in the life of a hiring manager. I'll paint you a scenario, and I think that will give you some perspective on why they make certain decisions and why they react in certain ways. So, for a hiring manager, when they hire, they are it's like Bangalore, Bangalore is building for the last 10 years, not for the future, not for the next 10 years. And hence, it's always under construction. And this is how a team is as well, right? A team is always under construction. The person who's hiring is hiring someone who they needed 6 months ago, not 6 months later. They try to hire for 6 months later. They try to anticipate, but it's very, very hard to do that. And the other important point that I want to stress upon is that they have a very, very specific need. They actually need this person to maybe interact with all the customers, right? Do all the customer interviews, gather all the inputs, and then work with design and then on the engineering side, they've got it covered. They have a very strong SDM, right? An engineering manager, or they want someone to actually just hardcore build technical IP, right? They don't have an external facing product, or they want someone to come in and really disrupt the pricing, right? You don't have someone who's able to do, or someone who's strong at pricing for you. And so it's really important, like even before you get your interview, one good way is to actually reach out to some of these hiring managers on LinkedIn, or even ask the recruiter, right? What is it that this team struggles with right now? And then you will have a much better shot at tailoring your experience to them. So on your resume, right, the resume is not at one point it is about telling people everything that you do, but at the same point, when the hiring manager is looking at it, they're just checking boxes in their head. They're saying, okay, I need this person to talk to customers. Is this person good in communication? Does anything say that they've done this before? I need this person to be design savvy. So have they worked with design teams in the past, right? Yes or no? Broadly, right? They want to screen it at a very broad level, and then they want to double click on some of these areas. Your first interview is going to be really, really telling. And that is going to define sort of the direction that the rest of your interviews are going to go to. So I hope those are some good pointers around how to um, how to sort of tailor yourself to what the hiring manager is dealing with, right? They are looking for a very specific checklist and nothing else.
Got it. I think that's a fantastic view. I think which I think will be is very. I mean, I hope everybody registered this point that she's making. That don't just look at from your perspective. A good product manager will actually look at the customer's perspective. To be very honest, and the hiring manager is essentially trying to buy you, right? Essentially trying to rent you out for years to come. Effectively, that is what is happening. So you have to ensure, or you have to at least try to get a sense of what exactly is this person trying to look for, right? Is it looking for a very technical person, very design oriented person, very customer friendly, people friendly, talkative person, or somebody else, or a all rounder, right? If you're not that person, it's going to be hard. For example, you can develop those skills, but it's going to be very hard in general, right? So if you're not a very technical person trying to enter a razor pay, for example, it's going to be very, very hard. For example, even if you have acquired, but if you do not have demonstrable skills or demonstrable assets, it's going to be very hard for you to justify that. Because ultimately, they are also just trying to get somebody who can quickly get up to speed and get things going, right? Okay, there are a whole bunch of questions around interviews and this and that, folks. That is going to happen in the next class. Okay, this class is all about product teams, OKRs, etc. Once you have joined, what exactly is going to happen in the next class? We're going to address all of the things about career. Okay, but trust me, you will need the understanding of product teams and how product teams are formed, OKRs, etc., to be able to do a good job in the next class. Okay, so Sylvie, let's get back get the class back into the track. So there are few things. What are the different team structures that exist? So there is Spotify is pretty popular team structure. Google has very different structure. Amazon very different structure. Perhaps you would be acquainted with the Indian teams as well. How are they structured and so on. It'll be great to touch base upon maybe two or three different types of team structure that you have seen very commonly. And if you want to be a team, if you want to be a product manager in those teams, what do you need to have?
Yeah. So
Louder, please. Sorry, very
the
very feeble.
so
It's very
the
very feeble.
so the setting of your team is actually very very important, and it actually tells you the areas that you need to highlight in your interview, in your day-to-day life, on the job. This is something that is going to test you day in and day out, right? So let me take this with an example. So if your team is a platform team, right? If you're sitting in the platform initiative of an organization, it's very likely you're going to work with many many other teams, and hence as a PM it's very important for you to be able to manage these relationships with a lot of different teams. And what that really means is day in and day out you are going to be in a lot of meetings. So there's no point fretting about, oh, I have too many meetings, right? You are going to be circulating statuses, reports, trackers to a lot of teams. And so if you as a person do not enjoy it, right, you as a person do not enjoy that program management aspect of product management, you want to sort of carve that area out for yourself, right? You don't want to sit in a team where day in and day out your job is actually to drive multiple teams projects forward. So that's one thing. The second is, let's say you are in a team where you are part of a very large product organization, right? So some companies have central product organizations and then they have remote engineering organizations, right? And so there you have a lot more support from other PMs on shared product practices. But at the same time, you are expected to run individually on the product that you own. And so there you are expected to actually figure out a lot of ambiguous situations yourself, right? Because now you don't have, like, you are sitting part of a larger product team and everybody is going to do whatever, everybody is going to work on the product that they have to work on. And so the problems that you are solving are very, very specific to your area. And so there you really want to know that, hey, this is something where I am really good at upfront research. I am really good at honing in on the right solution, honing in on the right problem to solve, getting all the right inputs. There, I think you're just interacting with your one team and you're getting some feedback from your product peers, right, on that central broader team. Similarly, you also might be in an organization like, for example, for Amazon, PMs are tied by the hip to engineering. And so, and you might have a central design team that you work with, right? And so, in that case, particularly for AWS, PMs actually interact every single day, multiple times a day with engineering. They're making trade offs on engineering. And so, do you enjoy that aspect of it where you are pretty much like saying, this is the right technology, this is the right solution, technical solution to this, and by the way, then I'm going to translate that to a central design, right? And this designer now sits in the central design team. Um, Now, in regardless of the structure, I think it's important for you to marry your strengths into that role. And sometimes it's very hard to, like some of you guys said, right? It's very hard to figure that out from the outside, right? In your first pass, you want to actually present yourself as someone who understands these strengths and weaknesses, right? So that you can then at least ask the right questions in your first interview or ask the right questions to the recruiter even before you get started in the process. Um, my general approach is definitely interview, you know, and understand what that fit means to all these different teams. And then towards the end, when you're sort of in a good place with the interview process, then start analyzing and assessing it. So don't do it too early in the process. As far as teams go, each of these teams have different OKRs and different types of goals and org structures, right? So, for example, in the team where you are part of a central product design team, your goals, your deliverables are all sort of determined at a central level, in the sense that you might have goals for 10 products or 10 initiatives as the goal for the organization, for your product organization, right? And so now you're measured against a set of 10 products that are doing similar sort of feature development or new development. Now, if you're part of a small sort of, let's say, an ad hoc team, right, a small team which is a guerrilla team almost, that's doing just one product, and that product is out for and that product is very ambiguous, very new, then your goals are actually set by you, right? You as a PM collaborate with the engineering manager, collaborate with this, and you set the goals. But the additional responsibility of a PM is actually to communicate that goals and make sure that you bring inputs from your leadership to that goal. An example for this is, yeah, last year I started a new initiative, right? So my team actually seeds a lot of new products into the ecosystem. And what I mean by that is sometimes it takes like a year for you to build something out and then say, hey, this is now good enough for me to actually convert it into a real new AWS business. Versus there is another product that I started, which is also something I started last year, and that I think is nowhere close to yet being something that we'll actually launch as a new AWS business. And the difference is truly in the OKRs that are being set by my team, right? When I have four different things going on in a team, you want to actually focus on one or two important products, heavy hitters. And then you want to sort of shift your focus to the other investment areas, which are going to be slightly slower until you have more time and bandwidth to cover the rest of it. So OKRs is it's sort of an art and a science at the same time. And you want to have a good balance between following OKRs, setting your own OKRs based on the team's OKRs, and understanding, just a very good understanding of business priorities. Um, One last thing I would leave you with on this topic is, don't be blind to business priorities. So what I mean by that is, don't swim against the ocean all the time. And very simply, what that translates in the product world is business priorities are going to change constantly, and it's very important to have a very nuanced understanding. Business OKRs, they are, even though they are kind of set in stone, they are somewhat fluid. They're fluid to market dynamics. They're fluid to COVID, for example, right? They're fluid to incidences like these. They are fluid to people leaving, teams changing. They are fluid to investment, how much investment or how much funding or how much headcount your team has at any given point of time. And a lot of things can change that. So as a PM, it's very important to be tuned into what is that, what are these elements that are sort of impacting your team, and for you, you have to make the best out of that situation, right? So if you have something that is deprioritized, uh, figure out what else is prioritized and quickly help the shift, right? Don't be the noise maker that just makes it very, very hard for everyone else to also get on the program, to also understand the shift, to also relate to the shift, right?
Awesome. So, Surbi, OKRs. Now, OKR is something that people have heard of, but they're not exactly, because honestly, especially in India, companies are still trying to make sense of it, right? So OKRs are good to haves, not must haves, essentially, and things are happening on the fly. Correct. Having said that, I personally do believe that every single PM should have their own personal OKRs. right? Instead of bothering that my VP is not bothering me, so why should I bother about OKRs? But honestly, that gives you a very clear direction, clear good guidance, so to say. So it's a good practice, irrespective of whether the company believes in OKRs or actually asks you for OKRs and KPIs or not. So it'll be great, given that OKR culture is not very prevalent in India yet, and I hope that that happens in the next 1 year or something. Can you take maybe 2 3 examples of, let's say, a very young startup, let's say, where things are happening on the fly, like the Pixie, for example, the very first company that you were at, versus, let's say, Amazon, right? So and maybe, let's say, somewhere in between, Series A, Series B company. Can you give 2 3 examples of what an OKR would look like, and how would you create an OKR, or how would you evaluate that your reportees they are setting up the right OKR? So if you can just touch upon that, I think that will be very valuable for a lot of people.
Yeah,
You,
absolutely.
you can use the whiteboard here in case you want to write something.
I think that it's sort of a OKRs in my mind are actually a measure of a proactive measure of where you want to be. And as a PM, you really want to understand where you want to be in the next one milestone, in the next two milestones. And I think one of the first things that people struggle with is actually getting a very crisp answer to where I want to be, right? And so then they just don't set that milestone at all, right? And the simple reason for this is, when you're setting a milestone, you actually need to do some work to set that milestone in the first place. You need to understand and you need to have foresight on what you're going to be building very, very measurably in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year, right? And that kind of takes some time, takes some work to set up. So let me sort of talk about my experience with a startup, right? In a startup, like I'll sort of go through the differences. So in a startup, the OKRs are actually a measure of, let's assume, like in Quixie, we actually set OKRs once every 3 months, right? So basically, what we did was, every single product manager had one slide. On that slide, you had a high level product roadmap. And in the product roadmap, you sort of talked about 4 or 5 areas of investment that your team, 4 or 5 initiatives that your team is going to deliver on. And we also assigned a level of confidence to it. So like there were some initiatives that just, we were sure we were going to get there, so those were 100%. And then there was some that were like 30%, right? These are initiatives where we know we need to do something, but we're not very clear on something. And then we used to have a program manager who would then go on and sort of consolidate everything and publish everything. And then we will also jointly review every 3 months. This was an exercise. Every 3 months, we would go and review these OKRs and make sure that they're signed off and sealed. And now there's a charter for the company, right? So now, anytime somebody said, "How are we doing?" we just pulled a slide up and said, "Hey, this is how we're doing. We have like we have 1 more month to go, and we have this, and this remaining, and that would determine your red, green, and yellow status, right?" So now you're a little bit measurable on how you're progressing as a team. But I think that this was still at a very high level, right? And in a startup, sometimes you have to be at a higher level so that you're nimble and agile at the same time. So these broad buckets, they didn't dictate specific features or specific, like very small bug fixes. Like I need to go and enhance my login flow, right? That's just a feature or a bug fix, and so those are things you would do anyways. Now, as you move to sort of slightly more structured organizations, so for example, Amazon is a great example of this. You'll see this happening in Google, you'll see this happening in Facebook, in a lot of sort of slightly larger teams. Um, and this is a culture that has been driven right from the leadership all the way to the last individual. Is there are actually projections and plans that are put in place in the beginning of the year to tell you how your business is going to grow, from a even from a revenue perspective, from a customer perspective, from every single feature perspective, from new initiatives, from focus areas in the beginning of the year. And that's because oftentimes, like in for larger companies with established user base, it's very hard to change your direction and your focus and your growth within a matter of months, right? And so what you're going to do this year, like let's say you're launching a new product in a big company, right? It's going to take you a year. It's going to take you a year for you to build out enough feature sets for you to get there for V1. And so you want to be very measured about yearly initiatives. Of course, this is not true. These are like general sort of general directions, and of course, it depends on the team. There's always a depends, right, when it comes to OKRs, but largely you will fall as part of a larger organization initiative. So a lot of times in bigger companies, your OKRs are actually reviewed and signed off by your CEO or by your CTO, right? And they are largely sort of there's a lot of work that goes into setting your high level goals, and even your detailed goals. And a lot of times there isn't too much flexibility in backing out of these OKRs in larger companies. So it is a much more sort of measured and thorough initiative, and there is much less scope for you to wiggle out of them. I'll tell you this, for example, at Amazon, there are some very, very solid internal tools that track this on a weekly basis. And these OKRs and these goals are actually reviewed continuously with leadership on a weekly basis. And the minute there is a slip, they are going to question you as to why it is. What can we do to bring it back? Bring this project back on track. And so everything is more granularly tracked than you would think. And so personally, I think it's for teams, for PMs that don't sit in an environment where there is a process around OKRs. I think this is an exercise where you can leverage your roadmap to define your team's OKRs. And I think that for your team will actually thank you, because now what you're telling them is 3 months down the line, there's a milestone, and maybe assign a date to it. So I always like saying 420. 420 is your next milestone, or 5:30 is your next milestone. And at 4:20, these are the four things that you need to deliver, right? And now, if you've not missed it, that's great. If you've missed it, 4:20 became 4:23. And now everyone will know that you slipped a date. And over time, as you do this 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, you'll really start to understand that you are being more planned around what you're delivering on 4:20. And if there's a slip, why are you slipping? And before you get to 4:20, you are sort of closely monitoring, are you going to make 4:20? Are you going to make 4:20? And it's just ingrained in your head, it's ingrained in your team's head. So yes, and 4:20 means April 20th.
Awesome.
uh,
So, so Sylvia, I think this was great. I think in terms of understanding OKRs across, can you take one example? Maybe just pick one example of what will a OKR look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you an example in a large organization. So in a large organization for the C-level execs, an OKR looks like I will deliver this. Let's say I'm working in a consumer app, right? And I need to deliver an Android app. So an OKR will say I will deliver a new Android app that reaches with a initial target of, I think, 10,000 customers, right? And this Android app is going to be this it's going to be on it's going to be a new messaging platform, right? So that's your high level goal that your CEO is tracking, or your CTO is tracking, or your head of product is tracking. Now when it translates down to your own team that's delivering it, this actually contains a detailed roadmap of how you're going to get there on so and so date, right? Now, this sort of high level goal is now updated on a status on a weekly basis. So, on a weekly basis, you're reporting if the date is still, let's assume the date is October 31st, right? October 30th, right? And so this is going to track whether it's still the 30th, or if it's like a day lesser, if it's a day more, if it's October, if it's November. And the minute it's changed, you're going to have to explain why it's changing. So, in order for you to arrive at that date in the first place and for you to commit to it, you need to actually build something called a roadmap. And so you're going to do that homework and you're going to say, it's going to take me 2 months to build so and so feature, 2 more months to build so and so feature. I need 5 people in order to do this. I have these dependencies, these risks. And so you need to have some amount of homework in order to set a commitment for the larger companies. Let's now take this in the startup world, right? In the startup world, I think the people who are monitoring these are probably your investors, your CEOs, of course, monitoring this all the time. And then, but I think the small difference is even here, you are going to take an OKR goal of building an app, and let's say 2 months into that OKR goal, you actually get a change in direction from the company. You say, okay, now I got to go build this ads product as well. Now your initial OKR goal and number of people are limited. So now your initial OKR goal can now be moved a little bit, right? Of course, there is commitment. You of course want to deliver it, but now the company's priorities have changed. And so in real life, like you want to set that OKR and you want to say, okay, the structure remains the same, the roadmap remains the same. It's just that the priorities sort of change, are more dynamic when it comes to the startup world. They are a little bit more fixed and rigid when it comes to slightly larger companies. Now, again, in larger companies, I'm talking about general larger companies with set processes, and this does not apply. I mean, there are exceptions all over the place when it comes to both startups and with larger companies. And and each of these OKRs, these goals, are actually determined and sort of driven by product management. And oftentimes you'll work with either your chief of product or your CTO or your engineering team to define them.
Awesome. There are few questions that are coming in, largely around tech. So how can a non-tech PM define OKRs for the engineering team, for instance? Um, you don't. I don't think you define it for somebody else. OKRs are defined for yourself,
So
right? Can
I think
you?
that, yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I sort of went through this journey myself, right? I said, okay, I'm very enthusiastic. I'm a high ownership person. So I go and sort of build these trackers for everybody. But really, once you build a tracker, then you're like, what do I put inside it, right? And particularly from an engineering perspective. So you want to partner very closely with your engineering manager or the lead engineer or the engineer, right? You define this OKR for yourself, you define this OKR for product. And what I mean for product is you are defining them for your end customers, right? um, and you are defining them from the needs perspective. Your engineering actually has an engineering leader or an engineering org who needs to define it for them. So I'll give you an example. This is something we're doing at the moment. My engineering manager is defining OKRs on how to reduce cost by improving the architecture. And this is an engineering OKR, right? And this is an OKR for his team, for his, like, this is an initiative that he wants to drive. And this initiative for me, like from a user surface area, is not going to make a difference, right? This is all plumbing underneath, but it needs to be done. It will have a benefit eventually for my customers. It will reduce in costs, it will reduce prices for them. But at the same time, this is an initiative where it's a purely engineering driven initiative. And so you can, like, an OKR is a very personal goal set that you have for yourself. Now, I'm talking about sort of product OKRs, but at the same time, personally, you also want to set your own OKRs. So, like, for example, in product, one of my OKRs is this year, like, this is a personal goal that I have, is this year, I want to actually actively make sure I'm looking at metrics and and really deeply understanding those metrics. And this is something that I personally want to do in all the projects I want to take. And this helps me in personal growth, but also it helps my team, right? So that's sort of an underlying OKR that I have for myself. Similarly, for the engineering manager, maybe their OKR is I want to grow my team because my team is really stressed, right? My team is working every weekend, and so that's like something that they will double down on, which is like not delivery related, not product related. So definitely, you don't have to take ownership of the whole world. An OKR is actually a collection. It's actually a shared goal that you tie together, but you want to review each other's OKRs so that you don't, it's like a bicycle. One you can't have one tire go in one direction, the other one go in the other direction. It has to be in tandem. So you want to be connected and joined at the hip, but at the same time define your own OKRs that make sense for the goal that you are looking to accomplish.
Fantastic. There are few more questions which have been asked. I think now is a good time to start picking on them. So broadly, the question is, how do you work with developers? How do you work with designers, project managers, program managers, etc.? Right? And how do you share this? If you, let's say there is an OKR culture, or let's say in absence, actually let's talk about in absence of OKR culture, how do you ensure that you are able to work with them? That is one theme that people are talking about. The second thing that people are talking about is, let's say I joined a company, or let's say I've been assigned a new project which I have no idea of. Right, I had no idea of e-commerce, for example. I have no idea of logistics, but the project has been assigned to me. Now, how do I get up to speed really fast? It's not exactly connected with the OKRs, but in general, with how do you be a good PM in general? So can you touch upon these two questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that collaboration is very, very key, and it means different things in different roles. So, and one of the learnings that I've had personally is that um, what you're going to be doing as a PM, your engineers are not going to be even know about it most times, right? So, for example, in AWS as a PM, you work very heavily with marketing. So all the marketing page updates, the content actually comes from PMs, which is then gone into review and whatnot, and then published. And the publishing cycle also happens with a third person, and so you are basically responsible for that. You're also responsible for any pricing page updates, and you are responsible for understanding what price to put there in the first place, right? So you're working with maybe two or three other people on the pricing and the billing side, right, to make sure all of this is set up for your launch. The third thing is you're working with documentation, right? And the fourth thing is you're working with probably like all your leadership, right, to make sure that you are constantly tracking the goal. You're also working with maybe writing a blog, right? So getting a blog published, getting some other team to write a blog, or you're writing a blog and you've got to get it published. You're working with some social media team, and so at any given point of time you are actually working with a ton of people, but engineering is working with you, right? So you are pretty much a central person who decides if there's a delay in engineering, I need to tell these people, right? And personally, I find the best way to do this is actually to have some sort of a shared space, right? Even a shared like Slack group that actually keeps everyone posted on a real time basis, especially closer to launch, on not only like what your timelines are, but very, very early in the process. Hey, I am going to launch something. This is my goal. This is my team's goal. And this is when we are thinking of launching it, right? This is the goal that we've taken. Here is a link to a document that just has like one or two paragraphs about what we're trying to accomplish, right? And then that gives them an opportunity early on not only to plan for it and put it in their OKRs, right? It's very important for them to be able to support you as well. They have 100 things going on, and so you want to actually make sure that they're aware of your OKRs as early as possible. In some of the larger companies, I do it as early as a year ahead, right? It really depends on the initiative, but I do it as early as possible. Now, at the same time, sometimes these OKRs change, and so managing this change and communicating this change to all the different parties involved is very, very important, right? Now, this is when you are giving an OKR, you are giving a goal to them saying, hey, I need your support. I need one person to actually support me for like half a week's worth of work, or 10 weeks worth of work, in order to make me succeed in my goal. Sometimes teams will give you OKRs. Teams will tell you, I need you to help me, right? I need product support, or I need design support, or I need help from your team. I need the time of one product manager for 6 months because I'm working on something new. And so there, you've really got to understand and be aligned with that other person, saying, okay, I can actually have this person freed up for 6 months to do this, and this is why this is a priority for me. So again, I think it really depends. Like if I have 100 things going on, and if I absolutely cannot, I don't have any bandwidth, everyone on my team is really busy, I will not give them that person, and I will say, well, we can't do it now, we have to figure it out, we have to hire a new person, or we have to figure out how to we have to figure out the priority. If this is something that's a priority for the business, then I need to figure out what else to drop, right? So these are like real time decisions that you would make. Is um, and this is true even in the life of a PM, right? Is what should you work on today, what is priority, and of course you have conflicting priorities, you work on multiple different things. So all of this is actually the binding glue for all of this is OKR. I can work, I actually currently work on 4 different products, but at the same time in my head it's very, very clear that this is the one thing. If I don't ship this, nothing else. If I don't ship this, everything else will not matter. And so every day when I plan, like when sales teams are reaching out to me, when BDs are reaching out to me, people are setting up meetings, this is my OKR, is the lens in which I choose to spend my day very, very collectively, um, to determine what to take and what not to do. um, I think the other question was really around um, uh, sort of like how many OKRs. I see a little bit of a theme there, and then a non-tech PM defining like a non-tech sort of OKR view on it. I think that you need to have both, right? So your goals, your personal goals are career growth, right? You have to understand that this is not your first job, this is not going to be a last job. So you need to also get something out of it, right? So um, personal OKRs are actually really good to actually tell you, like in those career conversations, when you're sitting down with your manager, go with the list already in your head. And this shows that you've already introspected and said, I am really good at design. Like I'm really good at technical product management. I think I'm good. I make good decisions. I've launched some products, but I actually am not that good at growing my product. Like I'm not getting enough exposure talking to customers and getting that input from customers into my product, or I haven't had a chance to build a roadmap yet. Tell your manager these very pointed things that you want to do in order for you to be a better PM tomorrow than you are today. And that's a personal sort of goal, right? It's still related to work, but it's still a career goal, but it's still very personal to you, right? These are initiatives you want to take. For the team, now if you manage a team of people, it's very important. You need to sort of define your team's vision, your strategy, what you're going to do from one year to the other, from one year to the next, much ahead of when they start asking for it, right? So like I usually take December to actually understand, okay, I actually reflect on my team sometime around December. I'll take a look at what we accomplished last year, what is forward looking that we already know, and then where are places where we're not doing well, right? So personally, like for my team of design and PM, one of the places that we want to invest in next year, for example, is we want to get someone to do user research, because We all of us do user research, but we are all very stretched, and so these are like reflections, right? So my goal for next year now is to hire a user researcher and figure out and make a case for a user researcher. Similarly, my goal for next year for my team is I delivered 20 features last year and 20 and impacted this much business. I want to actually grow that, right? So these are very measurable team OKRs that you can learn to set. The other thing is maybe you also want to just like my team, for example, in the first 6 months, it was just heads down work, right? So maybe one of your goals should also be, hey guys, like I want to make sure that my team has an offsite, right, once every quarter to really refresh, reset. So you want to smell out a lot of these um, you want to smell out a lot of things that would cause burnout, that would you want to also address personal sort of goals for your team members, and at the same time you want to grow your business.
Awesome. I think that covers a good variety of issues, right? Just to give you a sense, Survi, there is about half of the audience is roughly about 45% audience is PM, existing PMs. About 45%, or let's say 43%, just a little bit, is our PM aspirants. So they are giving interviews, they are trying to get into jobs and so on. So all of that is going on, and then there is last about 5-8% of people who are founders and so on, right? So obviously the questions are etc. are split. The people who are not yet PMs are trying to figure out what is okay or etc. is okay, but let me get in first. And the PMs, existing PMs, are trying to figure out what to do better now. So I would like to. It'll be great. Like we are already over our time, but it'll be great if you can touch upon just a couple of things for the benefit of everyone. For number one, in the current situation where things are bleak and not so great, um, for existing PMs, what can they do to stay employed on one hand, or if they've been laid off or something like that has happened, then what can they do to improve their odds, or what can they potentially do essentially? What can be their strategy? Number one. Number two, PM aspirants. Now jobs have dried up in the sense there is, I mean, people have frozen the hiring for some time to figure out what exactly is going to happen. So what should PM aspirant do today? So if you can touch upon these two things, I think that will be very useful and good segue to end the
Yeah,
session.
absolutely. Yeah, I think the times that we are in are very uncertain, and it's hard to sort of even see it coming, right? And I think that one of the first things for people who are already in product management, for people who are already product managers, really sort of go and talk to your manager and understand how the business is doing, right? You want to understand if your business is actually impacted or not impacted. For example, if you're building like a security solution, right, you're probably not impacted as much as someone who is in the food delivery business, right? So definitely try and understand, first and foremost, whether your business is impacted. The second is you want to understand if your team is impacted. So the initiative that you have, how is it stack ranked in the priority of whether it's essential or non-essential, right? So those are like early indicators that can tell you potential impact of something like COVID, right, into your current job and your current function. The more prepared you are, the earlier you can actually start exploring opportunities, right? Number one. um, Number two, if you've been laid off, there are actually LinkedIn is your best friend right now. There are actually many different individuals, companies who have put together these Google sheets with all the companies who are hiring and all the people who've laid off. So get into some of these databases, reach out to your networks, post on LinkedIn, and make sure you get into a company that is hiring. So just like there are companies um, that aren't able to hire just because they don't have the capital, or they aren't able to sustain their workforce because they don't have the 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 runway, there are companies that are actually aggressively hiring. You want to definitely get into you want to get into that queue, and you want to get ahead in that queue. For people who are personally looking to take a break, right, and really sort of refresh from this experience, then I think one definite thing you should do, especially for people who are looking to get into product management, is take a course, right? Take a course on Pragmatic. And this is not a plug. This is something I pretty much say to anyone who's looking to get into product management from another discipline, is learn your fundamentals. This is the perfect time for you to do that. This fundamental is going to prepare you much better to do your interviews in like a month's time, or when sort of the market picks up. At the same time, don't stop interviewing, don't stop applying. So like, have a schedule for your day, and make sure that this is your full-time job. Your full-time job is now to find your next opportunity, and the OKR system actually works in this case. So set yourself an OKR saying, I'm going to get 3 interviews this month, and I'm going to get 5 next month, and then keep measuring. Have I got 3? It's like the 20th. Have I got 3? Have I got 2? It's like the 30th. Have I got 1? But reach out to people on LinkedIn. There are many people who are hiring at the moment. Um, Also, connect with many recruiters, or connect with teams that help you place, that help you find opportunities really easily. Not very helpful, but at the same time, I think it is going to take a lot of work. It is not going to be easy. I think getting into product management is not the easiest thing, regardless of COVID. Now with COVID, it's actually more uncertain. But at the same time, I think it's very important not to lose hope, and continue trying.
Absolutely. I think you said you said absolutely the right thing about this is the right time to actually charge ahead instead of instead of being too much in the on the defense. In fact, that is what I've been telling people, that this is the right time to be on the offensive, because overall, when things are slow, best time to invest, best time to figure out things, and best time to actually charge ahead of your peers that who were otherwise always ahead of you. Right? Best time to do this. Do whatever. Pick up lessons, pick up courses, take from us. If you're doing product, definitely from us, nobody else. But irrespective, take this time to pick up on all of this. Yes, interview as much as possible. Although the interviews have also dried up overall, but do take interviews. Maybe conduct mock interviews, but just be on the thread, because otherwise you will get rusted, and after 2 months you'll literally be starting from scratch all over again. And after 2 months, when there is everybody who is back in the market, you will realize that okay, you didn't take the advantage of the slow times. And honestly speaking, this time is not as bad as 2008 till now. Okay, till now,
Absolutely.
right?
I Yeah,
You graduated in 2008. I graduated in 2008, right? Right.
I think it's actually you'd be surprised, in the last 2 weeks alone. In the last 4 weeks, I have taken way more interviews than I have taken in the last 6 months. So there is very active interviewing, because the need has not stopped. Right, the requirement for me to have someone else help me join my team hasn't stopped. And at the same time, we've also given out quite a few offers. So it's not the same. It's not as the funnel isn't as optimized as it was like 4 or 5 weeks ago. But at the same time, it's not come to a stop. Um, so
Absolutely.
trying.
Absolutely. Any last question? Anybody? Anyone has any questions? Yeah, please. All the other questions, which is about product manager versus program manager, product manager versus product designer, I think those things are pretty readily available online. You can easily read upon them or ask on Slack. We'll be happy to answer. Perhaps give you a link. If there are any other questions on, I don't know, how to manage panic or anything. What is the right number of OKRs to have per quarter? Yeah, how many can you actually manage?
Three is my
Three.
golden number.
Okay.
Five is really stretching it. Like you need to have a superhuman team to deliver. But three deliverable goals are is something that you'll sort of learn how to manage. The beauty about these three is they're not super granular. They're not super high level. Like they're doable, but they're not like, oh, I need to wake up and send an email and that's my OKR, right? So um, three I find is a good number to start with.
Three in general is a golden number in my opinion as well. Three is golden about everything. Uh, top three OKRs, top three goals, top three products, top three metrics, top three North Star. Everything is, you pick the top three and you're largely good. Don't bother about anything else. If in doubt, how many? Then just pick the first one. Okay, that's it. Either the top or the top three. That's it. There's nothing else.
And these three are prioritized. So don't forget that of these three, you still have importance. So
Right.
got to do number one, no matter what. That's like a do or die situation. You've got to do number two, as in the second OKR. And then the third one, you want to keep as an aspirational OKR, which is, yes, I really need this. I really want this for my team. But I do know in my mind, I do know that, maybe I'll hit 80% of it, right? You want to hit 100%. So if you're a team, you never want to tell them, hey, the third one is optional. Don't ever tell them that. They're not going to do it. But for you in your mind, like when push comes to shove, you know the trade-offs between the three. So make them very, very measurable and make them very, very make them very like make them very deliberate.
Great. Thank you so much, Surbhi. This was an amazing session. I hope people understood the value of this. Perhaps not today. Maybe if not today, you will realize it a few months down the line. Once you're in the PM, you'll realize, oh shit, I should have heard a little better. But for all those who attended, thank you so much. Um, I can see that.